This is still an ongoing ordeal, and it started last week, and I'm still trying to figure out how to handle the insanity that has quickly taken over my life. I have recently moved into a new town and have been job hunting. I stopped by a hotel on the shoreline and went in to see if they needed someone for desk work. Inside was vacant, dark, and smelt stale. The man behind the desk had an extremely thick accent, and it was difficult for me to understand him. It seemed like he was the only person in the building, and I got a strange vibe from the place, but stayed to fill out the application and turned it in as quickly as possible. I could feel him staring at me the whole entire time. The man muttered something under his breath, and then took my application. After I left, I decided I most likely would not be accepting a position here because of the strangeness of the situation, and really regretted leaving my phone number and address and other personal information on the app. Later that evening, I'm at home watching the Olympics in my living room around 10 or so. I go into my bedroom and grab my phone off the charger and see I have a missed call from just a few minutes earlier. It's strange for anyone to be calling me so late, but I redialed the number to satisfy my curiosity. A woman with a thick accent answers and demands to know who is calling. I politely told her that I had a missed call from this number. She starts screaming no repeatedly at the top of her lungs and then hangs up. It freaked me out that she had used my name in her crazy talk, but figured it was some crackhead that misdialed my number. I take my phone with me back into the living room and sit down. Right then, my phone starts ringing again. I answer it, and it's the man from the hotel yelling my name over and over again. He is screaming at the top of his lungs, and I can hear the woman yelling too. I could catch pieces of what they were saying, but in between their accents and both of them screaming, it was difficult to get it all. I heard, "Disturb my phone? Disturb your life. You can't see," or something along the lines of that. I hang up really fast and proceeded to flip out. They call back 14 times within 20 minutes. Thankfully, I don't have a voicemail set up, so they couldn't leave any. My husband came home around midnight, and I told him what was happening. He laughed it off and said they were probably on drugs and just dialed my number to mess with me. I really hated the fact that these people had a decent chunk of my personal information, but I figured they were too crazy to do anything but make creepy phone calls all night. About a half hour later, I wake up to my dog barking and growling and charging at the back door. I know immediately something is wrong because she never acts like this and is well trained. My husband and I both sprinted into the living room and saw a hand reaching through the doggy door, clawing at the tile. I screamed, and my husband grabbed me and we went into the bedroom and locked the door. I dialed the police, and thankfully they were there within 10 minutes. The man was long gone, but I knew exactly who it was. I gave them my statement and showed them my call log from earlier. I called the number, but it was a prepaid phone, so there wasn't a lot they could do to trace it. By the time the police left, it was around 5:30 in the morning, which was okay with me since I wouldn't be able to sleep anyways. A few hours later, my husband, who was still really pissed off, and I decided to go to the hotel to try to get some information about the guy and inform the staff that his guy was nuts. We spoke to the manager there, and he told us that the man I described had been fired a year ago for stalking a housemaid. I thought to myself, what the hell was he doing in the lobby last week then? They checked the security cameras and discovered that he was constantly around the hotel and staring into windows. I guess he had snuck in while the manager left the desk right as I walked in. The manager contacted the police and was able to file trespassing charges against him. Now, at least the police are looking for him. At this point, I'm in tears. I had given a crazy person all my info, and he was harassing and stalking me. I'm still receiving phone calls from a strange number during the night, but luckily he hasn't returned to my house as far as I know. I contacted my references I had used in my application to let them know what was going on. Apparently, my old boss was left a voicemail around 2 in the morning on Monday of heavy breathing and perhaps some sex noises and moans. This past week, I haven't been able to sleep at all. I'm a nervous wreck and jump out of my skin every time I hear the phone ring or my dog bark. About 8 years ago, one of my friends lived in an old 2-story house that had been converted into 3 apartment buildings, 1 on the top floor and 2 on the bottom. At the time, my friend and his girlfriend, who was visiting from out of town, were the only tenants. The other bottom floor apartment was being used for storage by the landlord, and his apartment was on top. The other bottom floor apartment was being used for storage by the landlord, and the apartment on top was empty, though we knew 2 people who had lived in that upper apartment pretty recently. As the only occupant, my friend had made himself at home and managed to explore the entire house at various times. One day, he realized the door on the side of the house didn't really make sense considering the layout of the rest of the rooms. The door was padlocked and a few feet off the ground with no steps leading up to it. Anyways, for whatever reason, he decided to bust open the padlock and see what was behind the door. When he did, he found a narrow room the size of the closet that was tall enough to extend both stories of the house with a ladder in it. So he climbed up the ladder with a flashlight, and on the second story, he found a very tiny room filled with crumbled Burger King napkins, and a bottle of baby oil, and a baby monitor. The room had a tiny window that looked directly at the toilet of the upstairs apartment, and the mirror attached to the bathroom wall was positioned so you could also see the shower. This was an apartment a few of our friends had lived in. He went into the upstairs apartment to see what the window looked like from the other side. The kick plate beneath the sink was plexiglass, covered in limousine tint. Thoroughly freaked out, he went downstairs to his bathroom to investigate. And sure enough, he noticed the wall in his shower had a strip of tinted plexiglass, about crotch high, positioned beneath the shower head. Crawling underneath the house, he found another tiny room with napkins in it. This one looking into both his bathroom and the bedroom of that unit that the landlord was using for storage, littered with Burger King cups. I was 16 and walking home from work late at night when a guy pulled up beside me and started asking me, "Do you live around here? Where are your parents?" His questions got more personal. He asked me what school I went to and where I worked. Then out of nowhere, he says, "You're a really brave girl for being out alone this late." He then expressed all the sexual and terrifying things he wanted to do to me. I was scared to death and didn't know what to do. Then he said, "I'll be right back," and drove off. Once he left, I started bolting the rest of the way home, thinking he'd come back and rape and kill me if I didn't make it home quickly enough. He swerved back a few minutes later and saw me running. He pulled up closer to me and began screaming for me to get in the car. I just kept running as he trailed me, and I ended up hurrying into a 24-hour store and calling my dad for a lift, who was really just annoyed that I had woken him up and didn't care at all about what was happening. Later on, I felt stupid for disclosing so much personal information to a stranger, and now realize he only tried to gauge my vulnerability. I was terrified he'd track me down for a bit, but I never saw him again, I think. So I'm around 4 years old at the time, and my mom takes me with her for some grocery shopping. She lets me walk around, but attempts to keep a close eye on me. Lo and behold, I decide to run off in search of some fruit roll-ups, those being my favorite candy at the time. I'm walking up and down the aisle and see this creepy looking guy that turns around and starts talking to me. "Hey there, son. Where are you headed in such a hurry?" Mind you, I'm paraphrasing what he said. It's too far back to remember exactly. Anyways, he starts asking me questions. The first question being, "What's your favorite candy?" I of course let him know it's fruit roll-ups. So he says, "Can you help me pick one out for my daughter?" I say sure, and he grabs my hand and walks me down the aisle into another aisle. I remember this exactly because I had made a comment regarding how there wasn't any candy in this aisle. Long story short, he is walking me around the store and my mom is freaking out. She runs up to the desk, or whatever the hell you call it, and tells him that her child is missing. The store goes on lockdown and the guy gets the hell out of there, and I don't remember much after that. A few years ago, I went out to a Christmas party. That night, my housemates went home earlier while I decided to stay and get in the Christmas spirit with a few other friends. I ended up getting pretty hammered and got home around 3 a.m. Instead of going straight to bed, I got out another beer and then went outside on the back porch to have a smoke and look at the stars. I was outside for a couple of minutes when I see the light go on in my kitchen. My housemate comes out and looks at me out the back. I wave and generally look like a drunk idiot. I thought he was going to come out and give me a debrief on the rest of the evening, as there were some good laughs, but none of them were really relevant to the story. Anyway, he just gets a glass of water and goes to bed. I finish my smoke and beer and do the same. The next morning, we were rehashing the previous night when he mentions getting up and seeing me having a smoke out on the back, and then he said, "Who came home with you from the party last night?" I gave him a sideways look and said, "No one, dude. I was out there alone." He insists, "Nah, man, there was someone out there with you, behind you on the porch when you were looking inside waving." I didn't come out because I thought it was some random friend from the Christmas party I didn't know and didn't feel like introducing myself. To this day, he still stands by the version of events. Whoever it was must have been standing close behind me the whole time. I saw no one and heard nothing. It gives me the creeps every time I think about it.